The news now. The process to elect the 267th leader of the Roman Catholic Church begins today at the Sistine Chapel. Roman Catholic Cardinals will enter their conclave in seclusion as they start the process. Newzroom Afrika's Mnisi is live for you from the Vatican now. Linda, good morning to you. It's an incredibly important moment for the world's Roman Catholics. What are we expecting to start today?
Well, Stephen, in less than half an hour from now, the special Mass, and that's essentially to pray for the conclave, will take place. And that's where all the congregants will really come together to pray for this all-important process. The College of Cardinals will also be present. They'll participate in that process. And then, of course, it'll lay the ground for what will happen next, which is the preparation to go into the conclave, which is at the Sistine Chapel. But I'm joined now by Father Phuti Makgopa, who will give us a sense really of what to expect this morning. Father Makgopa, thank you so much for your time. One of the things, that will happen this morning is the Mass prior to, Cardinals going into the Sistine Chapel. But it's also an important process, given that the Catholic Church itself is deeply rooted in traditions and rituals, and this one is one of those special Masses. Talk to us about really what to expect.
Well, you're right when you say it's rooted in traditions, and one of the traditions that we will be seeing today is the one for the celebration of the Mass for the election of the Pope. When you look from outside, it looks like any other Mass. It is the content of the Mass itself that tells you what they are praying for. So the prayers will be specifically for the invocation of the Holy Spirit to inspire the electors that they may elect, not according to their personal plans, but according to the inspiration, according to what they believe the Holy Spirit is inspiring them to elect. So that will be also reflected when they will be doing the election itself. They take an oath before they make a vote to say, I'm saying that I believe this is the person that the Holy Spirit has inspired me to vote for. So it's a continuation of what they would have started at the Mass. So all the prayers, the content of the prayers in this Mass that is going to begin just now will be around the Holy Spirit, inspiring the electors to be able to elect what they believe is the person God has chosen.
And of course, before going into the process of voting, right, there are a couple of people that will be around that will be providing support for the cardinal electors, and those include the secretary of the College of Cardinals, but also amongst that team are two doctors who are on standby for any medical emergency. Talk to us about the process really of going into the Sistine Chapel and some of the people that will be there, because we understand they too have to take an oath of secrecy.
Well, that is absolutely correct. Any other person who will be involved in the process, including the doctors that you mentioned, have to take an oath of secrecy. They have gone to the extent of even making an electronic sweep of all the places where the activities will be taking place. And so that also includes the people who prepare their rooms, the cooks, and everybody who in some way or another, directly or indirectly, is involved with the process has to take an oath of secrecy. Yes.
And that oath of secrecy extends to even how they engage, and if they may hear anything about the appointment of a pope, they cannot tell anybody until the official announcement.
Well, that is true. In actual fact, it is so serious and so severe that if it is discovered that one of the electors has leaked information or has been influenced from outside to influence the elections, he will fall into what we call an automatic excommunication. So in the church they will call it a lata sentencia, meaning that we don't need to know that you did it. You know you did it, and God knows you did it, so you are automatically excommunicated. So it is that severe that the secret has to be kept. Nobody has to know the process. The general process is what we know. But what they do not want you to reveal is who was voted by how many people and all those stuff. Okay, so that is how it works.
All right. Chat to you later. Thank you very much, Father Makgopa. He has to go to that all-important mass that he's talking about, but touching on quite an important aspect of a technical sweep, because they also, Stephen, have to ensure that there aren't any audio devices that have been installed in the Sistine Chapel. So they're ensuring that the process is, of course, pure and without any undue influence. And like he indicated, of course, those who will be providing support to the cardinal electors will have to take an oath that even if they hear anything about the election of a pope, they cannot tell a single soul until that official announcement. Stephen?
Linda Mnisi, thank you very much indeed for that update from the situation in the Vatican. Of course, more live coverage through the afternoon and through the next few days until the white smoke emerges from that chimney. Well, Bishop Edward Gabriel Risi is the Bishop of Kimos around Uppington in the Catholic Church, joins us now to talk more about this. Sir, good morning to you and thank you for your time. As I understand the history of the Catholic Church, this is actually the biggest ever conclave. Could that impact the length of time it might take for them to agree on a new pope?
Good morning to you and the listeners. Not necessarily. I think it's the spirit of the whole time of prayer and of discernment. That can take longer, but not because there are more people. I don't think so.
There's a sort of political intrigue about it, and I think people like me report on a conclave. I'm sorry to say this, almost like we would report on a meeting of the ANC or the DA or something. I mean, should we be looking at it differently? We're talking about a church with a very long history, not a political party or a government. Obviously, the situation here is very different from almost anything else.
Yes, quite right. I think the process of discernment is one of prayer and contemplation, is very much part of it. Just now you were talking about the Mass that happens soon in St. Peter's, but I myself with the congregation this morning offered the Mass for the same intention. So it's not just something that's happening in St. Peter's, it's happening worldwide. And I would guess that in every parish, priests are celebrating the same Mass with the same intention. So you have the whole church united in a moment of prayer. And the point is, as you read it in the Acts of the Apostles, Lord, show us the one who is to take over this office.
So just to understand then, what you're saying is that it's not, the whole idea of it is that in terms of your faith, there would be a revealing of who the right person is rather than just the personal preferences of the cardinals who are voting.
Correct. I think we always say in our theology that the grace of God builds on the natural. So the natural would be the conversation, the discussions, even the mundane questions of who do you like, who you don't like. But at the same time, there's a moment of prayer of you withdraw from that and you try to be open to the guidance and the leading of the Spirit. And that's what the church is praying for, that the cardinals, who are the ones that have been selected for the process, that they be guided by the Holy Spirit.
There's been a lot of change in the Catholic Church, and I think one of the aspects of this is where the new Pope would come from. In other words, would it be someone who's Italian, someone who's European, maybe someone from our continent, from Africa, perhaps from the Philippines? There's this idea that if the Pope comes from Africa, for example, that might impact the future direction of the Church. Do you see it like that?
Well, actually, those are not questions that would be on the minds of the cardinals, because basically in the last 9 days, they have been having meetings and they've been trying to identify, using their own science, trying to identify the signs of the times and where the Church needs to move. And then they look for the candidate who will move in that direction. So wherever he comes from is not a concern. What is the concern is that he be a person who is open to the guidance of the Spirit and is able to work with the Church, which is always trying to live under the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
When I was growing up in my generation, there was one single Pope. There was Pope John Paul II, and he was Pope for 26 years. He oversaw the fall of communism, the end of the Cold War, and then after him, Pope Benedict was Pope for 7 years and Pope Francis for 12 years. How important is the length of your term? The longer you are Pope, obviously the more influence, I presume, you would have on the future direction of the Church. And there was a period of one person in charge for a long time. Now, over the last few years, or the last 20 years, call it, we've perhaps had a lot more change than we saw before that.
Well, if I can go back earlier than that, the first Pope I remember being elected was Pope John the 23rd. And he was Pope only for 4 or 5 years. And he made the biggest change of all in the Church. So I don't think it's got to do with the length, although the length of time is good, because I think that gave John Paul a time to consolidate many things. And of course, John Paul and Benedict was also working behind the scenes. So that was a time of consolidation. But when you think about a man like Pope John the 23rd, in his very short 5 years, he actually opened the windows.
There's a bigger conversation, I suppose, around the relevance of the Catholic Church at the moment. And I know you belong to the Church as a matter of faith. I'm afraid I'm a secular journalist, and I live in a society that seems more secular. Do you believe that the Church needs to do more to make itself more relevant? And I'm sorry to sort of forecast this as a journalist, not as a matter of faith, but I fear we're about to enter a phase with more international and regional conflict than we've become used to. And I wonder if there may be quite an important role for the Church to play there. And let me be direct. I'm talking specifically around what's happening in the United States. There seems to be shots fired between India and Pakistan this morning. Is the Church perhaps about to find that it has a much bigger role to play?
It will always be. I mean, we are in the cold face of things, right, in the different areas. And it's really the local church that has the energy and the strength to handle those situations. When we speak about the Pope, we're speaking about a universal reality, but the church really exists in the groups, in the parishes, in the dioceses throughout the world, and that's where its strength is. But one thing, you're talking about relevance, I think there's something that Pope Francis really taught us. In his Laudato Si, people who read it consider, well, he's getting involved with the science of global warming. But actually, deep down, Laudato Si is calling humanity, to step back and become more contemplative of nature. Nature is speaking to us, and we need to be more listening to it. We violate nature by wars, violence, by the way we use it. I think that was Pope Francis's great gift, actually, to the world, was actually let nature speak to us. It too has something to say.
Bishop Edward Gabriel Rees, sir, thank you very much indeed.